She doesn't want peace. She wants tension. They told you to be gentle, to be soft, to be open, to tell her how you feel, what you fear, what you dream of in the quiet moments of the night. They told you vulnerability was strength, that being the good guy would win her heart, that flowers, texts, thoughtful gestures would carve your name into her soul, and you believed them. You were trained to apologize for your power before you even learned how to wield it. They praised your sensitivity, told you women wanted a man who cried, who talked, who exposed his wounds like poetry. They said she just wants to feel safe. So you tried. God, you tried. You silenced your edge. You traded tension for tenderness. You poured yourself out like a soft hymn, hoping she would listen, hoping she would stay, but she didn't. Instead, you watched her eyes drift toward the man who said less, the man who didn't text back, the man who didn't ask for permission, who wasn't afraid to walk away. And suddenly, everything they taught you, it cracked. You feel it, don't you? That subtle shame, that quiet confusion, the ache of doing everything right and still being forgotten. You look in the mirror and ask, was I not kind enough, not available enough, not present enough? But here's the truth. Freud tried to scream into a deaf world. Kindness is not currency in the economy of attraction. You were taught how to be liked, but you were never taught how to be desired. There's a difference, a brutal one, and Sigmund Freud saw it long before you were even born. He spent his life studying human desire, not the sanitized version you see in movies, the raw, primal, unsettling version that pulses beneath the surface of every polite conversation, every controlled smile. He asked a simple question: what does a woman want? And he gave an answer so disturbing, so deeply true, that most men still deny it. Even she doesn't fully know, but her body knows. Her nervous system knows. Her desire speaks in a language older than her words, a dialect of tension, danger, and gravity, not safety, not sweetness, not your emotional transparency. What Freud discovered, and what most modern men have forgotten, is that female desire is not logical. It's not moral. It's not fair. It's a wild, unconscious force, and it is not drawn to what's soft. It's drawn to what it can't control. That's why the more available you are, the faster she vanishes. Why the more you reassure, the less she believes. Why the more you expose, the less she sees you. Let's go deeper. Why does she say she wants one thing, but chase another? Why does she ghost the man who listens and sleep with the man who disappears? Why does she say, I just want stability, while fantasizing about chaos? Freud called it repetition compulsion. It's the unconscious pull toward patterns that don't heal us, but wound us again and again. Not because she's broken, not because she's cruel, but because, biologically, she's been shaped for millennia to test and select, to pull, to provoke, to find the man who doesn't bend. That tension you feel when she withdraws, it's not punishment. It's measurement. A test. Not of your words, not of your worth, but of your core. And most men fail because they think they're being punished for being soft. So they become even softer, even more apologetic, even more nice. And in doing so, they vanish because what she's searching for isn't softness. She's searching for a man who doesn't flinch. You've been lied to, brother, not by her, but by a society that's terrified of male power, terrified of masculine gravity, terrified of the man who doesn't perform, but simply is. And so, they told you to chase, to be accessible, to compromise, to explain, to confess your every thought and insecurity, as if emotional nakedness would unlock loyalty. But it didn't, because what she desires is not what you were told. She desires the man who doesn't explain, who doesn't ask, who walks with direction, not desperation. The man who doesn't orbit her, but lives so completely in his own mission that she wants to orbit him. The man who doesn't place her on a pedestal because he doesn't need to. And maybe that feels unfair. Maybe you're still clinging to the fantasy. If I love her harder, she'll stay. If I open up more, she'll understand. If I give her everything, she'll finally choose me. But Freud would tell you, with piercing clarity, you're not being rejected for being weak. You're being rejected for being too obvious, too available, too eager to give yourself away before you've even built something worth giving. This isn't about playing games. It's about breaking illusions. Because real masculine energy isn't about control over others. It's about control over yourself, your hunger, your urges, your need to be seen, understood, chosen. When you kill that need, something changes. She stops looking at you like a puppy and starts wondering, who is he? Really, she doesn't want peace. She wants presence. She doesn't want you to chase her. She wants you to chase your purpose. She doesn't want to be your emotional mother. She wants to feel your edge, the part of you that cannot be bought, cannot be swayed. cannot be silenced by validation. That is what awakens her. That is what Freud saw. That is where your story begins again. Not with softer words, but with stronger silence. Let's be honest, brother. You didn't lose her because you lacked love. You lost her because you gave her all of it. Too soon. Too wide open. And that wasn't strength in her eyes. It was surrender. It began innocently enough. You thought connection was built on vulnerability. So you revealed yourself, piece by emotional piece. You answered every text, replied within minutes, offered apologies before there were offenses. And in your eyes, you were being a good man, someone worthy of her love. But in her eyes, you became predictable, accessible, manageable. And Freud would say that's when the chemistry died. Because desire doesn't bloom where there's full access. It thrives in distance, in depth, in the gravity of a man she can't completely possess. This is the instinct she doesn't fully understand, but deeply obeys. She says she wants peace, safety, and stability. But her pulse spikes at chaos, at danger, at the edge of control. And you, soft, attentive, apologetic, you never made her nervous. You never made her wonder. And so she drifted. Not because you were bad, but because you were safe. And here's the cruel paradox. The more you tried to hold her, the faster she slipped through your fingers. Because your attention, instead of creating warmth, created weight. The weight of your need, your constant presence, your emotional exposure. And to the feminine psyche, that kind of transparency doesn't feel like intimacy. It feels like burden. She wanted to orbit a force, not become the center of your universe. Freud said that women do not desire safety. They desire significance. They don't want to be your life. They want to be chosen by a man who already has one. A man so grounded in his path that her presence enhances it, not defines it. But the moment you made her the source of your validation, your emotional compass, your reason for waking up, she stopped seeing you as a man. You became a project, a responsibility, something to manage. And that's when the tests began. She'd go silent, pull back, start arguments over nothing, question your tone, ask vague questions to fish for insecurity. And you, thinking it was love on the line, responded with more softness, more giving, more compromise. But what she was actually testing was your edge. Freud believed that the female unconscious doesn't crave agreement. It craves boundary. She doesn't want your submission. She wants your solidity, the line in you that won't move, the code you won't break, even for her. And that's the piece most men miss, because modern culture raised you to prioritize emotional harmony. You were taught that a good man listens, accommodates, validates, no matter what. But Freud would argue that's not attraction. That's appeasement. And appeasement to a woman's ancient instincts screams weakness. The man who bends every time she pouts. The man who apologizes for his masculinity. The man who fears her withdrawal like death. That man is not trusted. He is tolerated, and worse, he is forgotten, because she cannot surrender to a man she doesn't respect. And respect is born not from kindness, but from gravity, from restraint, from silence that doesn't beg to be filled, from presence that doesn't flinch in the face of mood or manipulation. Freud said that the id, the primal, hungry part of us, must be shaped, not unleashed. That raw masculinity without discipline becomes chaos. But masculinity that has tamed its chaos becomes power. That's what her body responds to. That's the signal beneath her tests. She's not trying to ruin you. She's trying to feel you. Can you hold your line when she pushes? Can you stay grounded when she stirs the storm? Can you say no without guilt and walk away without fear? Because if you can't, she knows she's stronger than you emotionally. And if she's stronger, she can't follow you. If she can't follow you, she can't desire you. It doesn't matter how beautiful you say she is, how loyal you are, how emotionally aware you've become. If your core is not sovereign, if your path bends for her approval, she will feel it, and she will lose the very thing she didn't know she was looking for. A man who leads without asking permission, not leads her, leads himself. That's what Freud uncovered in his exploration of the unconscious. The feminine desire to surrender is not weakness. It's a survival instinct. But that surrender can only be given to someone strong enough not to collapse under its weight. And here's the part that hurts. She doesn't always know why she leaves. She'll say you were too nice, too available, too much. But what she means is she couldn't feel you as a mountain. She felt you as a mirror. And a mirror might reflect her beauty, but it can't hold her. A mountain, though. A mountain stands, unbothered, unmoved, undiminished. And that's what she dreams about in the quiet hours of doubt and longing. Not the man who texted first, but the man who didn't need to text at all. The one whose life had velocity, with or without her. So what do you do now? You stop proving. You stop explaining. You stop bleeding your soul for crumbs of recognition, and you begin the work Freud spoke of: sublimation. The transformation of your hunger into hierarchy, your longing into mastery, your broken heart into structure. That's how you stop being the man who gets left and start becoming the man who leads. Because she will never kneel to a man who doesn't stand. She says she wants safety, but notice what she dreams of. Notice the tension in her voice when she speaks about the one who broke her heart, the one who disappeared, the one who made her feel things she couldn't control. That's not coincidence. That's instinct trying to remind her of something, not something she understands with words, but something her nervous system recognizes. Danger. Not physical danger, but psychological danger. A man who is not afraid to be alone. A man who doesn't flinch when she pulls away. A man who stays rooted when she storms with emotion. That man is rare, and that's why she remembers him. Freud said it best: desire does not flourish in peace. It thrives in tension, not abusive chaos, not theatrical manipulation, but the primal tension between the masculine and the feminine, between the man who is a mountain and the woman who is the storm trying to move him. She doesn't want him to fall. She wants to crash into him and feel that he holds. And yet, men today have been trained to fold, to apologize, to constantly prove their softness, to surrender before the relationship even begins. You were told it was strength to give your heart without question. That love would reward emotional transparency. And yet, you've watched her eyes glaze over, her responses slow, her desire drift. Not because she's cruel, but because the game is rigged against what you were taught. You were taught to be the pillow. She is looking for the wall. So what does the dangerous man look like? He is not cruel. He is not manipulative. He does not raise his voice or play childish games. He simply stands in himself, fully. He does not apologize for his presence. He does not need to be chosen. He does not text paragraphs to explain himself. His boundaries speak for him. His silence is louder than compliments. This is the man who wins her unconscious respect, not because he controls her, but because he controls himself. And that, to her, is power. Danger, in the Freudian sense, is not about threat. It is about power without attachment. Masculine presence that does not depend on validation. When you give up your center, you become soft clay, easily shaped, but never desired. Women don't want to shape you. They want to feel shaped by your groundedness. They want to test your edges and feel they are real. When they push against your boundary and you smile without fear, without bending, that's when she feels safe. Not when you bend, but when you stand. This isn't about dominating women. This is about mastering yourself. The most dangerous man is the man who cannot be seduced away from his purpose. And when he chooses her, she knows it's not because he needs her, but because he wants her. That difference changes everything. She can sense it in your silence, in your walk, in the way you leave space instead of filling it with noise. Women are tuned to subtlety. They feel your frame before they understand your words. If your frame says, "I'm seeking your approval," then every word you say becomes repellent. But if your energy says, "I approve of myself," and you are free to orbit or walk away, that freedom pulls her in. Why? Because it flips the script. Because it restores polarity. Because it gives her a choice. And here's the paradox. The man who doesn't need her is the only man she truly wants. When she says, "You feel different," she means, "I can't control you." And that excites me. When she says, "I can't read you," she means, your mystery is triggering something I haven't felt in years. When she says, "You're intimidating," she means, I feel your power, and it challenges me to rise. You were taught to seduce her mind with words. But Freud understood. It is the man who seduces her instincts, who lives forever in her memory. So how do you return to that man? You stop bleeding into text messages. You stop explaining yourself to people who haven't earned your clarity. You stop seeking closure from women who couldn't hold your presence. You return to structure, to stillness, to self-respect. You stop asking, "What does she want?" And you start asking, "What kind of world am I building with or without her?" Because women follow builders, not beggars, not performers, not wounded boys in need of emotional mothers, but men who create, who speak little and build much, who let their work announce them before their words ever do. This is what she cannot say, what she may not even realize. But this is what her nervous system is tuned to respond to. Authority without performance. Power without control. Leadership without need. You don't get this by faking alpha energy. You get this by becoming the man you were before the world softened you. You get this by remembering what you're here to do, and doing it whether she sees you or not. Because when you are that rooted, she can't help but see you, and when she does, she remembers what Freud warned us all. Women don't fall for safety. They fall for gravity. Become that. And you never need to chase again. There comes a point in every man's life when the silence around him begins to speak louder than the noise within. A point when the disappointments, the rejections, the emptiness no longer hurt. They clarify. You don't cry anymore when she leaves. You don't beg when she stops texting. Not because you're heartless, but because something deeper has awakened. Something's ancient. Something unshakable. The man you were before the world asked you to kneel begins to stir. You were never meant to be a spectator in your own story. You were never designed to beg for belonging, for softness, for emotional breadcrumbs tossed in the name of modern romance. Freud saw it all before we did. He tried to warn us. Love that is not built on strength, on containment, on masculine gravity, will rot. Not because love itself is flawed, but because men forgot how to hold it. You don't need to become someone else to reclaim your power. You only need to remember who you were before they told you to become gentle, soft, agreeable. The world didn't kill your edge. You gave it away, piece by piece, every time you apologized for having a spine, every time you silenced yourself to be accepted, every time you turned passion into politeness, fire into performance. But now, something is shifting. The edge is returning. Quietly, steadily. And it starts here, with your refusal to be emotionally domesticated, with your decision to stop asking for instructions on how to be a man, because deep down, you already know you are not here to be chosen. You are here to become. And in that becoming, you don't scream. You don't explain. You build. In silence. You lead. Not because she asked, but because you cannot imagine following anything but your mission. You walk, not with arrogance, but with unflinching direction. You love, not with desperation, but with grounded presence. You give, not to be validated, but because your cup overflows. That's the man she cannot ignore. That's the man she aches for in the spaces between her thoughts. That's the man who becomes myth. Freud's final truth wasn't about dominance. It was about dignity. The quiet dignity of the man who no longer trades his purpose for pleasure. The man who no longer bleeds himself empty hoping she'll call him whole. The man who, even if left alone, remains complete. She doesn't want to lead. She only leads when she cannot feel your direction. She only controls when there's nothing stronger to surrender to. And when you give her that edge again, not through cruelty, but through conviction, she will lean in, not because you demanded her devotion, but because your gravity left her no choice. Let this be your call, not to manipulate, not to pretend, but to remember, to build a life that moves whether she stays or goes. A mission so rich that no rejection can bankrupt you. An identity so rooted in self-respect that no affection can buy your silence. Stop watching. Start forging. The edge returns. Now stand in it. Not for her, not for them, but because you were born to.